Okay, this is the left hand grip. I'm going to replace the grips with our Avons that we sell. I really like those a lot, and sometimes it's difficult to get this grip off to reuse it. But if you want to try, you can go ahead and pop this end cap off, and then sometimes you can slide a screwdriver under there and kind of break the glue loose and slide that off, and then you can reuse that. If not, I'm just going to go ahead and cut it and then just slide it off there. So I'll be right back. Okay, our next step, we'll go ahead and take these nuts off the bottom of the triple clamp here. Make sure you save the big washers. So go ahead and remove those two, and then we'll show you how to get that throttle side off. Okay, I've separated this clamshell cover on the throttle side here. Go ahead and separate that. It won't slide off because the bars and the cables are too short. So what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and take the bars out. Well, don't forget to save this little plastic washer here too for the other side. But anyway, go ahead and just as you lift the bars off the bike, then you can go ahead and slide this off the end of the bar, the throttle. So go ahead and lift the bars out, slide that off, and then we're ready to put our drag bars on. Okay, let's go ahead and mount our risers now. This is the straight part of the riser here. Remember, that has the counterboard end like that goes down, and the chamfered end up. The reason for that is as you tighten these bolts, there's a steel bushing that'll compress in the rubber, and it'll slide up inside that counterboard area. So if you'll notice, I've got this one tight over here and this one loose. You can see that this one has the gap. As you tighten that, that'll compress that washer, and the washer should go up and hit that aluminum part there, so make this nice and rigid. And then go ahead and trial fit one of them, tighten one of them up, just make sure that there's plenty of thread. You've used up all the threads inside the clamp here. If that should be fairly close to the top surface there. Now if that's actually protruding into that round area where the handlebar goes, you'll have to put an extra washer down below. But go ahead and just tighten one up, make sure that you've used up all those threads, and then we'll continue on. Okay, I'm going to replace this grip with our Avon grips that we sell. So if you're going to leave your stock grip, just skip this section. But anyway, what you want to do is you want to adjust the adjusting screw here all the way this way, so that it gives you the most play in the throttle possible. So adjust that all the way that way. It'll leave you the maximum amount of play in your throttle. And then what you want to do is you just take this and just kind of rotate this up out of the housing like that. And then just kind of pull that cable over like that and release it. Get it released here. And then go ahead and release the other one. And there you have it. We'll put the new throttle on. Okay, go ahead and glue the proper throttle cam in place on your throttle tube like that. Now pay attention, because the small one, the narrow one, is for the Honda. Then this wider one is for all the other bikes. So make sure you don't use this wide one. It's the skinnier one of the two. So go ahead and do that, and then let it cure just like the directions say, and then we'll continue on. Okay, if you've lucked out and got enough play in your cables, you can go ahead and put this throttle back together. This throttle tube on the Avon grip is just a little bigger diameter, so it requires a little more play in the throttle cables for it to go back in. But anyway, basically you just hook the throttle cables in like that. It's outside the housing, and then hopefully you can just kind of pull that, kind of rotate it, the throttle, and kind of rock that in there. Don't put too much pressure on it. And pull that cable over the top. And hopefully that'll pop right in there, and it'll rotate and be just fine. Make sure there's a little play there. Make sure it rotates freely and snaps back. Now, if for some reason there's not enough play in the cables, pay attention, we will proceed. Okay, I'll show you all the adjustments on the cable to get it as loose as possible. Okay, this is under the gas tank. This is the snorkel on the air breather. So you go ahead and loosen this clamp here. And then go ahead and just kind of pry that out to get it started. I've done that ahead of time, but pry that snorkel out. Back that out so you can see it. Okay, this is on the right side of the motorcycle. Okay, this is where your throttle cables go down into your carburetor right here. Okay, now you'll notice on this one there's an adjustment right here. Go ahead and loosen that lock screw, and then go ahead and screw that down all the way down, as far as it'll go. And then you may want to snug that lock nut back up again a little bit, or just snug that up so there's no play in there. And that'll get rid of or maximize your play right there. And then the other thing you want to do is on your throttle tube itself is go ahead and remove the switch Inside here it has two little screws. Make sure you don't lose the little screws. Pop that switch out, and then you can go ahead and back these cables out. I'll show you that in just a second. Okay, the next thing you do is you take this the one adjuster and cable out. Just take it out all the way like that, and then that'll allow you to go ahead and adjust that locking nut all the way out on that one, and then you can go ahead and screw that in all the way. I would screw it in until it bottoms, the threads bottom out here, and then just maybe back it out, or a half turn or turn, just enough to get that on there. The lock nut just barely lock on there. You know, even if that was just floating and it was never locked again, that's not going to go anywhere. So even if you want to just back that all the way out and leave it loose, that's fine. But you want to get the maximum amount of play out of this you can. So, and then before you put this back in, make sure that this actually mounts on the motorcycle this way with the throttle tubes forward. So when you put this other one back in, make sure that you the throttle cables are in line up to the motorcycle. Make sure they're not twisted. So go ahead and insert that one back in there and screw that one down all the way, and then you should have the maximum amount of play. So go ahead and screw this one in all the way. Then you should have the maximum amount of cables hanging out inside the housing here. Okay, I've got this adjuster all the way down here, so there's the maximum amount of play in our cables now. This adjuster's all the way down, the one on the carburetor. So hopefully this will go back in there now. So I've hooked the cables on just like that, out of the housing. Let's see if we can go ahead and rotate this in. I kind of open the throttle a little bit as I put it in there, you know, kind of pry it in there. There it goes. Go ahead and pop that over there. Make sure the cable down underneath is under the housing good. And then there it goes. It fit this time. And there's plenty of play in there. So I think we're home free on that one. Oh, thank God. So let's go ahead and put our switch back in, and then you know, tighten the adjuster on the carburetor, put the little snorkel back on, and we should be ready to put these bad boy handlebars on this bike. Okay, for your reference on this switch, this is the cables coming out of this side. This is the off position here on the top toward the throttle connections here. And then on the inside, this is how it goes. So there's your switch, and then a little bar that holds the cable is like that. So I'll switch that over there. Okay, you can see that. So anyway, that's how that switch screws back in there. And then go ahead and rotate it a couple times, make sure it clicks good. And then we'll go ahead and mount the bars. Okay, let's go ahead and mount the handlebar to the motorcycle. If you'll notice, I've marked the center line of the handlebar, and then the right side of the handlebar is the masked side of the handlebar, the bare steel. That's for your throttle, obviously. So go ahead and lay the handlebars in the clamps, and now with these bottom bolts a little bit loose, go ahead and snug these caps up. That'll straighten the caps to the handlebars. And then after you snug those up, go ahead and tighten these bottom bolts on the bottom up. And make sure the handlebar is straight to the triple clamp. Okay, let's go ahead and mount our throttle to the handlebar now. If you'll notice, under the handlebar on both sides there's a hole. Okay, there's a little indent or a little tab on the bottom of this housing that clips into that hole. So as you slide this on there, you'll see that hole in there. Line that up and make sure that that housing, the little peg, goes in the hole in the handlebar, and that'll locate it for you. And then you'll notice I've taken the cables, the throttle cables, out of this loop up in front here. I've taken these out of here because it'll put too much bind on them if they're in that. So go ahead and do that, and you can go ahead and snug that up. Make sure that there's plenty of play in the grip. Make sure it works nice and smooth, and there's a little bit of play in there. And then we'll adjust that later. Okay, I've mounted my brake lever and reservoir here. Notice I've plugged the wires back into the sockets there. This is the cabling, and this is the hose. I'll explain that in a minute. We can change the angle of that just a little bit. This is the brake hose. And then I've done the same thing over here. I've mounted the switch housing. Make sure you put the little peg in the hole in the bar there when you mount that on, same as the other side. And I've mounted the clutch back on. Plug the wires into that. And then if you'll notice here, I've angled this clutch cable out of this wire housing here. I think it's going to have to swoop around like that in order for it not to bind. So go ahead and mount all that stuff up temporarily, and make sure your bars are angled up, because we're going to go ahead and stick the gas tank on next, and you don't want that, if the bars rotated over, I've mounted the tank for fun there, but if this swivels over like they do sometimes, it might hit the tank here, so make sure they're swiveled up for now, and then we can adjust those later, because you don't want them to hit the tank. So let's go ahead and mount the tank next, and then we'll continue on. Okay, go ahead and install this grip. This Avon grip is really cool. I just slide it against the housing here, and then you tighten these 3 set screws. Just tighten those up with a 2mm Allen wrench. I think a 5/64 American size will fit them also, I'm not sure. But anyway, go ahead and snug those up, and then that grip is on there for good. Okay, now's a good time to put their gas tank back on. If you'll notice, I've got the gauge on. It won't be on yours yet, but under the tank there's 2 rubber grommets on each side. I like to put a little bit of soapy water on those when I slide the tank into position. That way the tank will slide up onto the rubber grommets a little easier. So go ahead and slide that up. Make sure you don't hit the handlebar there when you slide it up. And then it's most important that you hook up the vent line. There's a vent line under this corner here. Go ahead and slide that hose up on there. This will still be loose in the back, so you can lift it up a little bit. And then go ahead and hook up your gas line and your vacuum line to your fuel petcock. Make sure you hook up that vacuum line. It's kind of hard to get under there, but make sure you hook that onto that little petcock that comes out. Otherwise, gas will not go to your carburetor. I explained that earlier. Yeah, that allows gas to go to the carburetor when the engine's running, and it creates a vacuum to let that fuel flow through that petcock. So anyway, go ahead and hook that all up, and then we'll go ahead and hook the back of the tank up next. Okay, the next step, you can go ahead and mount this rubber bumper under the tank. It's really simple. You just pull this little tab up like that, and then you feed it through the hole, and then this slot, this rubber grommet slot lines up with the slot down in the tank there. So if by chance you're missing any of these parts, you can always go on like a place like Bike Bandit and all those places and get this stuff. And another nice thing about their website is you can actually go to their OEM section. You can actually see schematics of all these parts and how they mount. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and mount that under the tank, and then we'll screw her down. Okay, I've got the rubber grommet in place down there. I'm just going to go ahead and slide this washer in there and put the bolt in there and cinch her down. Wow. And that should do her. We're done with the tank except for the gauge. And then go ahead and just mount your gauge like it was originally. It kind of slides up on the rubber grommet up in front there. There's actually a little channel that the gauge slides back into. You'll see it up in the side there. And then just snug those 2 bolts down there, and we should be ready to go. We'll go ahead and adjust the handlebars. Now that you've got your tank on your bike, you can go ahead and sit on the seat. You can either do this now or when you get your seat mounted on the bike, but now's a good time to go ahead and set the angle of your bars to wherever you decide they feel the best. I like mine just drooping a little bit from parallel to the ground. That way they kind of look like a true drag bar. So anyway, that's a personal choice. Okay, now the most important thing on this setup is make sure your throttle is really free and snaps right back. I've noticed when I've done bikes, if you take your adjuster here and adjust it all the way as loose as possible, so there's a maximum amount of play, and then work that throttle a bunch of times and then go ahead and readjust it. Sometimes that'll take the stickiness out of the throttle. And then another thing too, make sure nothing's binding inside. Make sure that the steel inside is nice and smooth. There's no tape residue or something in there. So make sure that throttle is nice and smooth. One other thing, if you're really, really careful, you can loosen this bolt right here that has this banjo flat fastener that comes out of the brake line. If you loosen that just a little bit, be really careful. Don't loosen it much. Just enough to where you can make that swivel. You can actually re-angle that brake hose a little bit so it angles up against the handlebar. And then hurry and tighten it. And make sure whatever you do, you don't get any brake fluid on anything, because it eats paint like crazy. So be really careful on that. And then if you do it properly, you won't have to bleed your brakes. So I do that, and then if you'll notice, I've kind of swooped these throttle cables down through there. I don't use the little wire. I actually took the wire thing off, the little wire keeper. That way they kind of swoop down and under there, and then they'll work nice and smooth. And then on the other side, what I did, I kind of swooped the clutch cable around. So you want these cables to make nice big swoops. You don't want any tight kinks so they won't work free. So what I did is I angled this wire thing down. I bent it down so that it kind of fits the angle of the cable better. Now, one thing you want to do too whenever you're adjusting these bikes, make sure you turn your handlebars all the way one way or the other, and then make sure that your clutch play and everything is the same from one extreme to the other. And the same with your throttle cable. Make sure there's no binding. Sometimes you'll turn it all the way one way and it'll take the play out. And you don't want that. You want to make sure everything swoops around and it's the same on both extremes when you turn the motorcycle. And then I guess the last thing to do is just make sure you snug everything up. Make sure you adjust your clutch. You have to have some play in there. Same with your throttle. Make sure there's a little bit of play there because that's important. And then make sure everything works smoothly and freely. And gosh, that looks real nice. I like that. Love drag bars. Let's move on to the next step. One last angle of this side. I've wire tied the wires to both sides, and then tied the wire with the brake line there. It just makes it look a lot cleaner and kind of gives it that finished off look. So do whatever you can to make that look real clean. This little Honda is just coming out awesome. So we're just about finished here. Let's mount the seat next, and then we'll do the wrap after that, and then we're done. So anyway, grab these pieces. This is your seat pans, these two, and then the springs. There's one here, but grab two. And then your little seat block. Grab those, and let's slam this seat on this bike. Okay, go ahead and mount the little block to the front of the pan like that. Make sure the hole is to the front. And then grab the springs and the screws that hold the springs on there. I've mounted those ahead of time so you can tell what they look like mounted. But this is how you mount the spring. Okay, grab the spring like this. What I do, I just shove the head of the screw down in there a little bit like that. And run the Allen wrench up and meet the Allen screw there like that. Stick it on the end of the Allen wrench basically, and shove that down in the screw like that in the spring. And then just take the washer and slide it over the spring or the screw like that, and shove the screw back in, and there you have it. The washer's on the inside, and then you can go ahead and put the spring, mount the spring through that hole. Now the most important thing is we want to overlap the top, this piece onto this piece. So this piece will go on the top of this one. So go ahead and do that, and then just put the nylock nuts on the bottom and leave these just a little bit loose for now. Do that to both sides. This is an unpainted one, so you can see more what's happening there. Okay, if you'll remember from before, these little brackets here should be a little bit loose still. And then make sure there's no wires and stuff down in this area that might interfere with the pan. So this is the way it slides onto the bike. Just goes on there just like that. That little tab goes under that flange out front. It should fit right down like that. Okay, now when you get it on there, these slots, you should see the thread of the nut on the bracket below. What we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and show you how to mount this all up so it fits really nice. Before we tighten this up, make sure that your springs are mounted this way. This is looking at the back of the bike here. So these are the springs here. There's a little loop, a funny looking loop on the spring. Make sure that's to the right on both springs. It's really important that you get that little loop to the right side. What that'll do is it'll space this spring away from this edge here a little bit. If you go the other way, if this loop's on the wrong side, the spring will be right next to that shelf there and it won't work as well. So anyway, make sure that those springs are on there that way. That's really important. Loop to the rights. Okay, everything should be still a little bit loose, even the springs. Okay, make sure the first thing I want you to do is put these screws in the back here. Put those two screws, and then just cinch those up a little bit. Go ahead and tighten those up a little bit. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to slide the pan, this front part of this pan, forward as we tighten these springs up. Make sure you push this part of the pan forward as you tighten the springs. What that'll do is it'll force that little flange up front. It'll force it up in there nice and snug. And then and then go ahead and tighten these up as you're pushing on that. And then after that's done, then go ahead and tighten these bolts here, the big bolts that hold the brackets on underneath these. I'll show you on the other side. It's the big bolt that goes through. This is the nut here, and it holds the outside of that bracket on toward the bullet light there. So first these, then these pushing forward, and then the big bolts down here. Now the way this pan is designed, it's really cool because all you got to do is take these two screws out. Even after the seat is mounted, you can take these two screws out and the whole seat and pan and everything will come out at once. And all the wiring and stuff will stay in place. So it's pretty cool. So anyway, let's continue on. Okay, grab your seat, and then this is the fork that mounts on the bottom of the seat there. What I want you to do is push the fork all the way back this way as you tighten these bolts up. So go ahead and shove that all the way back. You can cinch these up pretty good and tight, and leave the star washers underneath. That helps hold that bracket in place. So go ahead and tighten those up. Tighten them up pretty tight there, too. You won't strip them out. I've mounted the seat now. If you'll notice, the flanges on the bracket underneath are on the outside of the springs. That's not set in stone. You can mount it either way, but I think that's the way it fits the best. And then the washer goes on the spring side. And then the nylock nut. You can see on the other side there, you can see the washer. That keeps the nut from pulling through the spring. So you can go ahead and cinch those up pretty good. You can get those pretty tight if you want. And then we'll go to the front mount. Now, if it all comes out the way it should, you should have to push the seat forward a little bit as you put the bolt through here. That's what we want. We want that to go forward just a little bit, stick the bolt through there, and then go ahead and put the nylock nut on the other side of that. Now, what you do is you go ahead and run that in kind of snug, and then do me a favor and back it out about a half or 3/4 turn at least. You want that to be loose on there. You want that to be loose so it moves. And then give it a little shot of oil on both sides. Because this will pivot on this block here. It's a pivot point. So you want that loose, and you want it to be able to pivot on there. And there you go. I think we've got that seat mounted on there. It looks good. Let's go ahead and do the exhaust wrap. Oh, don't forget to tighten your signal lights up if you forgot. And then one last thing, if you remove these 2 screws, you can go ahead and lift this whole pan, seat, and all out of there. It's really cool. We're going to wrap these pipes now. We really like this big old stock pipe. If you'll notice, we went over it with some real fine sandpaper to give it kind of a brushed nickel look. Just go over it one lengthwise and be real careful, and you can make it look really cool. And we also did the same thing to the air cleaner and to the gauge. Speedometer gauge, housing. So anyway, okay, now what we did on this is we went ahead and popped off the heat shields that were on the pipes right here, on the header pipes. And then we ground the little tabs smooth. That way we'll have a nice little platform to wrap on. Now if you're going to use like aftermarket pipes, it's best to use to wrap over the heat shields if you can. Under the heat shield usually is an ugly little skinny pipe, and it doesn't look very good when it's wrapped. So try to go over the top of the heat shields, and then if you can, you know, don't use, if there's bulges and stuff or different diameters within the pipes, maybe stop at those or figure out something on that. So anyway, let's get started. I soak the wrap in warm water for about 5 minutes before I start. So I'm going to take this out of the bucket.